first time I've been to large group, it was at like Baker, so it's all new to me. But yeah. So quick introduction. I went to AACF. I was class of 2013 in high school, so then I came here like 2013. Class of 2017. So same year as Joseph, if you guys know him. He spoke like last quarter. I've been in AACF since like I was a freshman, my very first quarter. So it took me 4.5 years to finish. So I was in AA for 4.5 years, and did Bible study and men's ministry when I was there, and studied computer science. And then now I am currently working as a software engineer in San Francisco. So yeah. So before we begin, I'll pray for us once again. All right. So let's pray. The talk today will be about God's love for us. Happy Valentine's Day. But before that, I just want to give you guys like a short story on like where I was coming in with this, like my mindset into like this message. Like honestly, I was on one of those moments where I felt like I was really like struggling in my walk with God. Like a typical walk with God has like highs and lows, but I was definitely on a low, just feeling like inadequate, feeling like I was struggling with like sin and all this. And then it came to a point where it was like Wednesday night, this past Wednesday night, I was really considering just like not doing it because I really just didn't feel like I would have anything to like bless you guys with, because like I've been struggling. But like in that moment where I was just like really struggling, I was really praying to God, just saying like, yo, should I do this, should I not? And I really felt what God was reminding me was, you know, like, to bless you guys, it's not really like up to me, but it's like what God has done through me. And the reason why also, I feel like, as I reflect, the reason why I felt inadequate was because I watched Joseph's message, like, from last time, and I thought his message was like really, really good. And I was like, dude, there's no way that I could share something like that. But God reassured me that He has blessed me uniquely, and He assured me that, you know, don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to be Joseph, but just be yourself. And there's certain things that God has blessed with me with that I feel like He's put on my heart that I could share with you guys today. And I feel like the two things that God really reminded me of is that, let's see, the two things that God has blessed me with uniquely, I think one is like just the connection with like other alumni. I think just working in the city and then like living where I'm living at, I have decent like ability to like keep in touch with a lot of the other alumni. So basically the future you guys. So it's given me a holistic view on seeing like the struggles of what they've had in post-college life. And also the other thing that I think God has blessed me with is just, I keep a journal, and I've been reflecting a lot on like just life, on my college experience, seeing on what I thought was really important, and then like realizing like it wasn't really important after all. And just combining these two, I just really wanted to share like a message that I would share like to myself if I was in college. Now that I'm like 2 years removed from college, like just reiterating what really is important in like this Christian walk, so that way you can take it outside of this college context and really thrive. So yeah, so now to get you guys thinking, so we're gonna get into groups. Can you guys get into like groups of three or four? And I'm gonna throw out a discussion question to get you guys thinking. This is also to give me a break, because like I don't like hearing my voice for more than like 10 minutes at a time. So you guys want to get into groups of like 3 or 4? And I'll throw out the discussion question to get you guys thinking. Oh yeah, it's a group of 2 is fine. But you have to move, Anthony. Okay, he doesn't have to move. But my question to you is this: like, what moments in life do you look back at and you thought in the moment it was super important, but then like, you know, a few months later or a year later, you're like, yo, that wasn't that important after all. Can you guys think of anything? I'll throw my example out, and then maybe I'll cause you guys to think of stuff. But my example is, when I was a freshman, what I journaled a lot was like playing basketball. Like, not just playing basketball, like, oh, I played basketball today, but I would record like the stats I had, all the shots I made, and I would journal about it in detail. Because the thing is, like, it made me really happy when I played well. Like the next few days, I'll just be thinking about the shots I made and how I felt. I'll be in the shower just reflecting.
Oh my gosh.
But then the thing is, 1 month later, like I'll read the journal entry of like all these shots I made and stuff. I'll be like, dude, I don't even remember like playing basketball. And like there's no value to me that like I scored 6 out of 7 on threes or whatever, you know? So can you guys think of like things like that in your guys' life? All right, ready, break.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you guys are in this mode of reflection, you can kind of see like what you thought was important changes like as time goes on. And the thing that I want to try to get into is just trying to point out things that are like really important, because I think as you progress from college to post-college, I think there's more important things to deal with. Like what I've observed is I never had to worry about like finances or career or like community and all these other things. Like there's just a lot more important things to deal with. And at the end of the day, like as I observed like my case study on AACF alumni, right, I realized the ones that really are able to walk with God and like prioritize Him, I think they really prioritize and ask themselves this question. And it's in John chapter 21. You guys don't need to turn there. I will paraphrase this quickly, but you guys should read it. Double check for me. But because there's other passages we'll go through. But in John chapter 21, the context is that Jesus like died, right? But then he told Peter, he told Peter that he was gonna deny him 3 times, right? Are you guys familiar with this story, or kind of? Okay, somewhat. Okay, I'll give you a little bit more details. Make this. But okay, he told Peter that he would deny him 3 times. Peter said no, he wouldn't, but then Peter did. And then Peter was feeling bad, feeling guilty, and then now suddenly he's back seeing Jesus face to face again. And there's this moment of like reconciliation, like he must feel bad for Peter. Or Peter must feel bad for like just denying Jesus, or just not believing him, right? But then I think it's interesting. What does Jesus say to Peter to reconcile this relationship? Like, what does he try to get Peter to remember? Because whenever God asks questions, it's not because he doesn't know the answer, but he wants to make something more, he wants the audience to be more aware of something, especially where they're at in relationship with God. And you see what happens is that Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Like, and the crazy thing is it's not just once or twice, but 3 times he has Peter reaffirm his love for Jesus. And I just think it's interesting, like Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and then Jesus has him like reaffirm his love 3 times for God. And it kind of shows like that importance of the question, do you love God? Right? I think that's the question that like the alumni, when they walk with God, that successfully walk with God in post-college, that's, I think, the question that they really ask themselves and reflect on. And it's not just a random question. Like, if you turn, you guys could, okay, turn to here in Luke chapter 10, verse 27. It's okay, DC, you're good. Okay, the context of this passage, right, is that the Pharisees asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And I'm sure like you guys are familiar with this. He said, you shall love the Lord with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And the context of this too is that Jesus isn't just saying like this like randomly, like he made this up, but he's actually referencing Deuteronomy chapter 6. And if you guys aren't familiar with Deuteronomy, it's the 5th book in the Bible. Anyways, it's one of the earlier books in the Bible. It's one of the books that Moses wrote addressing the Israelites before they like go into the Promised Land. So this is like way back in the Old Testament. And in this portion of the Bible, this chapter is what referred to as the Shema, which is like a Hebrew word which means to listen. And it's probably, as I've like read through the Bible, I think it's the only time where they say like you gotta write this passage like everywhere. You have to remember this, don't forget it. And as I've like lived life and observed, like lived in college, lived in post-college, like this commandment is like super, super important. Like, cause honestly, if you always ask yourself this and really reflect on your life and you make the main goal to love God and love others in your life, everything else I've noticed just falls into place in the way like to live life. And let me just share with you guys just observations, like what does this commandment have to do with post-college life? So let me give you a glimpse on like my journaling and observations of the future you guys, the future AACF SLO alumni, like what they have gone through, right? So I wrote down 3 things. So first one is strong influences to not follow God. I think right now you guys go to AA every Friday. You have your small group, you have church, and it's easy to love God when there are so many opportunities to surround yourself with people that love God. But what happens when you take that all away? Do you still love God? Do you still have a relationship with Him? You see, like, right now, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but I'm assuming you guys are similar to me. But 80% of your time, I'm guessing, is around people who are Christian, right? Either your fellow AACF people, actually that's mainly it. I don't know how you guys spend your time. But either it's in fellowship or you're housemates with them, or you spend time with them, like hanging out, going to the rec and stuff. So then it's easy to love God because that's like the connection that you guys have. 80% of your time is just devoted to like Christian people. But what happens when you start working and 80% of your day is no longer just around Christian people, but 80% of your time is like around workers who probably do not care about God, probably do not know who Jesus is. Like, you may still hold on to your faith, but for some people I've seen that they've built up their faith on community alone, and once that's taken away, it exposes that they never really had connection with God. And that's what I want you guys to like, that I've observed, and hopefully you guys will be aware of and not be caught by surprise once you graduate. So that's one thing. The other thing, number 2, is compromise. What I've observed is like people are willing to compromise on their relationship with God. You see, if you look at that verse again, right? The goal is to love God, not just like a little bit or like try really hard or like with 50%, but it's everything. Your whole soul, your whole heart, everything. Basically just your whole being. And what I've observed is that some people, in terms of faith, they just rely on like their routine, you know? Like I see people that they still go to church, they still pray, and they still do the right things, but they don't really, really just love God with all their heart. They have other things that they start like trying to fill in that void, and that they start prioritizing. Because I think it's a side effect of just the environment they're in. Because subtly, when you spend time with non-Christians, you start loving the things that they do without even noticing it. I have to be anonymous with this, but I just see like some people, one person, his goal is just go to church, do this, say at least still believe in God, but then I'm just gonna hang out with my friends here that just like drink and like, it's just, there's some, I'll say the trend is that if you really don't seek to love God without compromise, I could just see like in the long run, you'll slowly go away from God. And it's like, so the first one is like where you just fully like just follow up. But what I've seen is like a lot of people will just struggle with that compromise because they don't really try to pursue God with everything. They just reserve a small portion for God. And that's why they'll fall away eventually. And then the last one, this is, I think, the weirdest one. I think I called nuns about this like every time I talk to them, I just complain about this. Hopefully you guys are just gonna learn about this because I think it's weird. I think, okay, 80%, okay, that's a rough one. 70 to 80, 60 to 80. There's a high percentage of people, like I'll actually call people, like random AA alumni and ask them if they go through this. And like a lot of them go through this to some degree, but I'll say it's weird. Because no one ever told me it was gonna happen, but A lot of people go through this. So a lot of new grads, they struggle with something I call like the being lost syndrome. You see, like a typical new grad, right? You will graduate, you'll hopefully find a job, or you'll struggle finding a job and then you'll get one, right? You'll start working, it'll take you a couple months to get ramped up, right? And then you start getting comfortable, you get into your routine and church and everything, and then it'll hit you like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? You see, your whole life, you have this progression on how school, on like where you're supposed to go. You go from high school to college. College, you have these classes you have to take this quarter, this quarter, this quarter, and then this is how you get the degree. And then eventually you apply and get a job. But then, once you get that job and start working, where do you go next? The progression is no longer laid out for you. It's no longer clear cut. And what I've noticed is just a lot of people, when they feel lost, they just start feeling like there's that void and they feel empty and they just don't know what to do. And I feel like I've seen a lot of people, they respond to it by just like trying to just fill that void with like anything. Like for me, my personal like way to cope with it was to pick up random hobbies. But it's been semi-productive. But it doesn't address the real issue. But anyways, other people like I've seen just go for relationships. Other people like they'll look around and see what the rest of the world is doing and then go like, oh, that person's like really prioritizing career, so maybe I should do the same. And what I'm saying is, you have to understand, remember that commandment, to love God with all of your heart, because that is like your guide, and you need that, especially in post-college, to really stay on track. Okay, cool. So that's my question to you. Do you love God? Is that the main focus in your life? Because this is, I think, the key thing that you need to really be real with yourself in order to really walk with God post-college. And, you know, like, I remember when I was a freshman and I asked myself that, like, do I really love God? Like, that's such a whack question, because it's like, when I was a freshman, I had a lot of doubts that God was real. So, like, on one hand, like, I barely believed that God was real. And on the other hand, like, how am I supposed to like love something I cannot like see or experience? So I thought it was like a struggle, but hopefully this activity will help you like try to understand what it means to like love God. So you guys have your groups, right? So I'm gonna throw out a question and you guys are gonna come up with questions and I will record your guys' answers. So, okay. So the question is, you guys are detectives. Ooh, cool. Okay, and now you guys are gonna ask me questions, and you guys are trying to figure out, like, who's interesting. So, let's pick Adam, for example, right? So, because he's hiding out there. So, your guys' goal as detectives is to determine whether I really loved Adam. What questions would you guys ask me? And if you guys have a question, or you guys could discuss with your group. But is that clear? Should I give you an example?
What's that person of reference then?
Huh? No, you were asking me. So let me give you an example. You could ask me, how long have I known him? Just like something like that. Does that make sense? Okay, get in your groups and then if you guys have, I'll record that one just for you. But if you guys have a good one, I'll like raise your hand and then we could add the. I'm trying to aim for 10 questions. Okay, ready, break.
Heckler. How much time do you spend with Adam?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Marriage is problems.
How much I love Adam?
His bad things he does.
Have you slept together?
It doesn't mean anything to him.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
Casual question.
What's his pet peeve? Any other good questions? We have 3 right now.
There we go. DC has one.
DC.
Yeah.
What's his 3's average?
3-point average.
3-point average.
Pointer average.
Oh my god.
Because his stats are really important in determining my love for him, sure.
Oh, this is specific
What's
to
his
Adam.
favorite food?
Yeah, this is specific to Adam.
Between The Office and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is his favorite show?
Okay.
I don't even know this one.
I think the one person is organized.
Wait, shoot. Someone said one and I forgot to record it.
Say who?
Wait, Gabby has to read. No. Someone said, oh, wait, what's his favorite food? Okay, hold on.
How often do you guys keep in touch?
Have I cooked for him?
When you wash his feet?
With your own hair?
That's why I grew it out.
Oh, gross.
Alright, I think, wait, you guys still have some? I think I'm gonna go for three more.
Would you be able to tell him when he's doing something wrong?
Ooh.
In love.
Alright, two more.
Oh my gosh, that's cute.
I love you, Adam. Alright, one more. One more. Someone, just anything. What? Is that it? Okay. This activity is gonna be interesting. For sure. Alright. That's enough weird stuff. We gotta move on. Alright, now. So you guys asked me questions about if you're trying to figure out if I love Adam. Okay, cool. So now, I'm gonna take those questions, right? And now I want you guys to like reflect on your relationship with God. Okay? So here we go. How long have you known God for? I think to really develop a relationship with Him, you've got to know Him for a while. How much time do I spend with Adam? How much time do you spend with God? If you say you love God, do you really spend time with Him? More than like you spend time for yourself? What's His pet peeve? What are God's pet peeves? Do you know? Because the Bible lists out like things that displease God. The Bible lists out things that God gets upset at. And do you actually know God well enough where you can know that? And you would try to not do the things that displease God. Because if you did, then I think, yeah, the Bible says, okay, I can't quote it, but somewhere in John like 14 or 15 or something, it's like, if you love, Jesus says, if you love me, you will obey my commandments. Right? What is his 3-point average? I will try to spin this and say, like, how well do you just know God? And his I don't know. Okay, that one's too hard. All right, the next two ones. What is his favorite food, and what's his favorite show versus The Office and Brooklyn Nine-Nine? But so you know, we talked about what displeases God, but do you know what actually makes him happy? What pleases him? What actually brings him joy? Do you guys actually have that relationship with God where you know what can actually, what he rejoices over, you know? And then do you try to actively do that? Have I ever cooked for him or washed his feet? What do you do for God? Do you serve him with any aspect of your life? I guess you can't. I mean, I think in scripture it says like, whatever you do for the least of these, that's what you do for me. That's why we're called to take care of the poor. But for God, like, what do you guys do? If you guys really love God, then what are the things you do to serve him? Okay, this one's gonna be tough. Would I be able to correct him? I'll just spin that and say, like, you have a relationship with God where you can be real with Him and honest with Him, like, where you are not afraid to share with Him what you really think and how you really feel. And when God rebukes you and points out aspects of your life which aren't right, are you going to respond and try to take in those changes, or are you just like resistant to changing for God? Have you told Him you love Him? Have you guys actually expressed that you love God, like in your prayers, or do you just ask God for stuff, you know? And I don't know how to do this one. Have I worn His clothes? I don't even know. What? Okay, I can't do that one. Huh? What about, say it again? Oh, okay. Maybe you should be the one to. But yeah, we'll take
Go
that
stand.
one. Have you put on Jesus? Yeah. So honestly, whenever I do this activity and I reflect on these things, like I feel like I fall like way short. Like just, you know, we're just humans, we're sinful. We don't really just have this focus on God where we really want to please Him and just really love Him. There's so many things that get in the way. And I think now would be a good time to talk about, like, how do we love God? Because there's a better way than just trying a lot harder than what you're doing now. And I think the passage to go to is 1 John chapter 4. You guys can flip to there. This will be the last passage of the night. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7. So starting from there, I'll read it. Beloved, let us love one another because love comes from God. Those who love have been born of God and know God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent His only Son to the world so that we may live through Him. There's a typo. Alright, so we could dissect this passage for like a long time, for days, but the main takeaway is, I'm just gonna like point out things. Like, first thing is, like, if we're called to love God, right, we need to know like where it comes from. Where does this passage say love comes from? God. Cool. Alright. Now next question. Who in this passage, what does it say about the people who love? In the verse it says that the people born of God and who know Him are the people who love. You see, the people who are born of God and that have been reborn and that have the Holy Spirit in them and know Him. Like, this is like the word to know is like, it's not just to like know in your head, but to like have a relationship with and have an experience with God. So the ones that have that relationship are the people who have this capacity to love, right? And then next thing, what does the phrase God is love, what does that mean? So I think that's like an interesting phrase, but the best way I'll explain to you is that God defines what love is. You see, everything that He has done in the Bible and now in the present day, and His heart behind things and the way He cares about us and just the world, that is kind of what defines what love is. You see, it's not something where we could just say like, it's like this, but it's something that goes beyond what we can just understand as humans. And every day, as you start to have that relationship and you draw closer and closer to God, you'll have a deeper understanding of what love really means. I think it holds true to this day. Like, as I spend more time with God and I try to just understand His heart behind things and His mindset and His intentions, my perspectives of love have like evolved like through these years, and that's hopefully the same thing for you guys. So, with that question, how to love God? I think from this passage you can see the source of love is God. So in order to love him, we have to receive it from him first, experience him, and then we can love others, and then we can love God, right? So the more short way of putting it is, I love verse 19 in this passage. It says, we love because he first loved us. You see, like, our capacity to love begins with the fact that he loves us. And when we understand that and that sinks in for us, we have the capacity to love God and love the people around us. So, should I do a demonstration? All right, we'll do it. How many of you guys know this demonstration? Raise your hand. It's because I'm not.
Hey, that's
Yeah, but hey, the majority of people don't know this. And honestly, when I think about it, like, it's convicting me because one of the struggles I think I have is like, I get distracted, and when I try to have a successful walk with God, I try to do things on my own. And you'll see in this demonstration that it's not the best. But to successfully like love God, right, is that you need to understand the source. And what I have here is like a cup, a little bowl, and a big bowl, right? And this cup will represent us, right? The little bowl will represent the relationships, and then this one will represent our ministries and the world around us, right? And what happens is that when we have this relationship with God, we start understanding who he is, and we start receiving his love, and it satisfies us and makes us feel like good. It makes us feel like loved, and that's what we're supposed to be, having a relationship with him, right? And we feel full. We feel filled, feel satisfied and content. But when the Bible calls us to love others and to serve others, what it compels us to do a lot of times is it causes us to think like actions-wise, like, I have to pour out, I have to do this and that. And what happens is that we try to pour out into the relationships around us, and we try to pour some into ministries. But what happens is that it leaves us kind of empty. And I think this is what happens a lot, especially in, I think it happens a lot in college, if you ever do ministry for the first time. That's always a struggle, because you try to do things on your own. But also, I realized, like, it happens a lot, like, in post-college life, when you're so like familiar with like what you're supposed to do, like go to church, do this and do that. I have to go to church, I have to serve, I have to get plugged in, I have to do this. And you forget that like the source of love and the source of trying to be filled is in God. And when you're busy in this posture of pouring out and trying to do things and not trying to receive, you're not able to receive from God, right? And other people will be blessed, and other people will receive, and other people will think you are like doing well. But really deep down inside, you don't have that connection with God. And I see it a lot, like people in church just going through the motions, not having a real relationship with God. And sometimes what happens, you prioritize relationships, or you prioritize like work or other things, and those things will prevent you from receiving from God. And God will try to pour into you but then since you prioritize these other things, you won't be able to receive, and you just feel empty inside. But the right way to do things is always to remember that the source of love is God. God is that source, and your relationship with him is honestly the most important thing you could have, especially as you try to transition into new periods of life, post-college or like second year, third year, or anything, is to always have that relationship with God and prioritize him. And the best way to do that is to just always remain in him, always be receiving his love, and to the point where it just overflows to the people around you. So you can see here that like, because you are being filled with God so much, the sustainable way to just really love God and love people is to have so much of God, so much of his love that it just naturally pours out of you. You don't have to force it, but because that's who you are to receive his love, it just overflows and blesses the people around you. And it's easy to forget that, I think, especially when you're busy, especially when there's a lot of responsibilities that happen in life. So I think, to end, I just want to end with like my own personal testimony about this. Like, I'll share with you just high level overview of like my college experience and then post college. And if you have any more questions about like life in general or my story, like I'll be happy to talk to you. And but I grew up in a Christian home. Actually, random side note too is I think just gotta take the testimony behind the testimony is that I honestly didn't really feel like God ever moved in my life when I was a freshman. But one day I just really took that time to just pray. Actually, I just drank coffee at night and I couldn't sleep. So I was reflecting on God. So if that's what it takes for you to remember God, I guess that works too.
That's right.
But reflecting on your own testimony. But see, the crazy thing is, I remember there was like a 5th year guy in the fellowship. He asked me like what my testimony was, and I was like, yo, I don't know. And I just prayed about it. I was like, God, dude, just reveal yourself to me in my life. And then the crazy thing is, God didn't do anything from those few days like crazy, but he just made me open my eyes to the things that already happened in my freshman year. And then I realized like God was just moving this whole time. I just never paused and noticed. So that's the side note behind the testimony. Like, gotta take that moment to just pause and just remember that God, or try to observe the things that God is doing in your life. But okay, testimony to close. Like, grew up in a Christian home, was a Christian since 4th grade. That's when I knew like life was short, because like that's when my father passed away. And that's when I was like, yo, I have to dive deep into this. But just because like I dived deep into it didn't mean like I was really strong with God, because I had a lot of doubts. The kind of background I had was that I just didn't see God in my day-to-day life. Like, the only time anyone mentioned God was at church, and it was only in that 1 hour window when they would have like the message in Sunday school, and afterwards like people acted like God wasn't there, and that was the strangest thing. But it wasn't until I came to AA, and then, people talked about God, people showed God's love to me, and it compelled me to just really discover that love of God, and just, people showing me who God was in their life compelled me to have my own relationship with God, compelled me to like really love him and just be in his presence and want to like love others. And I remember just spending time with him transformed me to be different. And that's my college testimony. But then as I left college, like I struggled. I don't know if I might have, from my knowledge, like I might have had like the most difficult time like moving on from college, because like what I realized, like this is my moment of like being honest with you guys. Like the mistake I feel like I made was I built up a foundation of faith around AACF and like the fellowship and the people, like the things that we did, the moys, the ministry and everything, and that was like my foundation. I always I didn't prioritize as much as I should have, like spending time with God alone and that personal relationship with him. Like fortunately, like I think God, I did have a decent enough foundation to survive, but it wasn't, it definitely was not solid. And when that was taken away from me, like that relationship with God was like not where it should have been. And like for 9 months, I was like, every day I'd wake up and I just feel like lost. I feel sad. I didn't know what to do, and fortunately, like, I did pray a lot. I did have that relationship with God. I didn't ever have a moment where I was like gonna abandon God, right? But it was just a realization that I prioritized like AA way more than I should have, than instead of prioritizing just God alone first, right? And I always felt lost until I went back to the basics of like right here. And the basics that I wrote down is that I wrote down 3 things. And once I really like drilled these in, I think that's when I really came back to have a solid walk with God again. And the first one is actions alone do not make for a healthy walk with God. I think I just got into that AACF framework, right? Like do these moys, talk about these things, and then go to large group and have this schedule. But then once that schedule doesn't translate over to the working life, like it was a struggle to have a healthy walk with God. I was just doing things without kind of forgetting about like why I did them. It wasn't because I love God, but it was just because I was like, yo, these are the right things to do, you know? So that's 1. 2 is you just need to get back to the heart of things and really love God with everything. I think I cared more about just like progress and just looking the part, making sure people saw that I was doing the right things, than just really thinking like, no, this is about God and not about like me. I didn't really love God with everything. I was caught up with just trying to transition well, just trying to build up a new community, because these things are like career, community, everything, that's all important, but it comes second to God. It comes second to God, and I really, really honestly did not get that right when I left right away. And the last thing, I think, if you just remember one thing from tonight, remember one thing, is just to understand that God really loves you and cares about you. Like, in order to really love God and to put Him first, it doesn't come natural to us as humans, as we are sinful. But we have to remember that you need to, remember those moments where it really clicked for you, that God really cares about you and that He loves you. Like, He loved you to the point where even though we were sinful, even though we turned our God, like He would still love us enough to die for us. He sent His Son to die for us, and there's just no words to explain. Like, we are so unworthy to know Him and experience Him and to understand how good He was, but He cared for us so much that He wanted to adopt us. And I think as times get rough in post-grad life, try to really, really remember those moments where you are sure that God loves you, because those moments are really what moments like that will propel you forward in the right direction. Because it's really, really easy to walk away from the faith, because that's the direction that the world is going. But you gotta try to remember those moments where you really know that God loves you. And I'm gonna pray for us. I know that there's gonna be some people here that are like thinking like, yo, the love of God, like I've never experienced that yet. And I just want to say that you're not alone. Like, a lot of people haven't had moments like that yet. But what I'll say is, like, if you really pray and really seek, like, God is there and He will reveal Himself to you. He loves you, and it's only a matter of time when you really understand that. So let's pray.